Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to host this webinar where we're going to talk about sort of Intelligent Cities Roadmap. This is in a series of webinars that we are hosting under Intelligent Cities or our Insight brand, under which we also publish a newsletter once a quarter. So today I'm joined, and I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to have both Andrew Buss, who's Deputy CIO of City of Philadelphia, and Tara Woody, who's Innovation Manager, City of Philadelphia. So welcome, Andrew and Tara. Let me just give you guys a little bit of a background on both of them. So Andrew is a Deputy CIO of Philadelphia, Office of Innovation and Technology. He and his team focus on public technology and innovation with a portfolio including digital equity, public sector innovation ecosystems, smart cities, creative services, and communications. After directing Philadelphia's implementation of the Key Spot program, a citywide network of 77 community technology centers, Andrew established the city's first innovation team with a focus on helping public sector employees think and work more creatively. Andrew also started the Digital Literacy Alliance, a cross-institutional grant-making group in the digital equity space, and collaboratively produced the city's first comprehensive digital equity plan. He earned a graduate degree in geography from Temple University in Philadelphia and teaches about the public sector in Temple University's Master of Public Policy program. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Vaz. Nice to be here.
And joining Andrew is Tara Woody. Tara works as an innovation manager in Philadelphia's Office of Innovation and Technology, where she focuses on increasing public sector capacity for innovation and creative thinking. She previously worked as the project manager for Smart City Philadelphia, where she helped implement a first-time permit navigator application for Philadelphia residents and businesses to use when seeking city permits. Prior to joining OIT, Tara worked in the Office of Complete Streets in Philadelphia, where she redeveloped and managed the city's transportation safety education program. Safe Routes Philly. She joined the City of Philadelphia in 2018, bringing several years of facilitation, program management, and teaching experience. Tara earned her master's degree in public policy from Temple University in May of 2023, and now speaks to different classes and audiences about innovation in government. She earned her bachelor's degree in anthropology from Temple University in 2013. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's get this started. So, I mean, both of your backgrounds talk a lot about in terms of innovation and sort of creative thinking in the public sector and the city management. Why is there such a need for that kind of a mindset? Like, what brought about that evolution or shift where there is focus on having a creative thinking and innovative way of doing things? If I can start with you, Andrew, and then Tara, feel free to chime in whenever.
Yeah, thanks, Vaz. I think when we started this work, and it was back in 2012, 2013, we felt like the city and a lot of its processes really were not moving along. They were not becoming more efficient. We were not really providing better services or programs to our residents. And we sort of thought about that from the lens of internal thinking or internal capacity. And the fact that we did not teach innovation anywhere. I never took innovation as a course myself. I wish I had. And we sort of took the approach that, well, if we can train city employees in some of the principles of innovation, which, as I'm sure you know, are kind of around design thinking, systems thinking, things like that, we should be able to tip the needle in our favor in terms of providing better services to people, because that's really what we're trying to do at the end of the day. That's kind of how the work started. I can go into that a little bit more. I'm curious if Tara has anything to add to that, though.
Yeah, I think you covered it. I find too that the government workforce is just changing, and it's changing quickly, and there's a desire for more creativity and new ways to solve problems. So as a team, as an office, it's important for us to be able to teach people the skills that they're looking to learn and to just kind of bring that creativity and problem solving into the space.
Yeah, Tara, I think that's a good point too, because we do have a changing workforce, Vaz. It's much younger now. think people are coming in kind of with more of an expectation that we will be efficient and creative, and the innovation work that we have done really fits into that mindset.
I mean, so before, I mean, I have a few other things I wanted to talk about, but before we get into that, I just wanted to pick on something that both of you have mentioned in terms of the changing workforce. So is it also a case of that in order to recruit good talent, you need to be a more creative, more innovative space, as opposed to just, hey, here is the job, here is the task that we require. So it's also almost like the cities have to evolve in terms of how they manage and attract talent. So it becomes more of a inspiring space for people, and especially for young people to come and work in. Is that sort of part of the thinking, or is it purely that that's just a byproduct where we really wanted to solve the problems or create the skill set and capacity to have sort of problem solving skills internally?
Yeah, I think you do have to create that mindset, and you also have to do some proactive things to draw people to the city who have that way of thinking. So it's not a coincidence probably that one of the things we're focusing on as a group now is how we can improve a lot of our basic HR processes. So cities do not typically do any sort of recruiting. They just sort of passively put the job out there, and hope people see it and hope that it sounds interesting. And it probably won't, because it's probably not very well written such that it will be interesting, right? I think what we find is, fortunately, in our group, we have some interesting stuff going on, kind of the non-traditional work of a technology office. And we have been able to get some really interesting people into our group who are very committed to the work, who tend to be younger. I'm certainly the oldest person in the group, but I think they have that mindset coming in of they expect the city to do some interesting work. They see how they can fit into the work. And I think we've implemented some pretty interesting stuff out there.
So, I mean, let me just pick a little bit on that. And would you mind tell us a little bit more about sort of your team and what is it tasked to do, and what sort of are the objectives of that team?
Sure. So I describe our team as the Public Technology and Innovation Group. We are within the technology office for the city. It is essentially public-facing technology that we are responsible for, and that's sort of a new thing in government, I believe, as well as the innovation portfolio. So there are 6 parts to that at the moment. We have, and you mentioned a lot of them when you introduced me, but we have digital equity, we do smart cities work. Tara and her colleague focus on creating an innovation ecosystem. That is kind of the internal government work. We have creative services, which is basically digital and print creative production. Digital services as well, specifically, which is resident-facing applications, so city services being served up online, or possibly also phila.gov, the city's website. And then finally, we have the city's, or OIT's rather, communications function. And I think that's kind of an interesting one to have in our group, because what we're finding is with a lot of this work, people aren't used to hearing about it. So you do have to talk about it. You have to promote it a little bit so that people know what the city is up to. And ultimately, they know that we have done these different applications through our digital services group, for example. So that's sort of the team as it is now. I often describe the work, or the team rather, as that we have all the functions that don't typically fit under a traditional public sector IT organization. And the other point I always make is that I don't think we used to be special. I think we started a lot of this work, but I don't know that we are anymore, in the sense that a lot of city technology offices are now realizing that you have to do both the public technology and innovation side of the work, as well as the basic operational support for city departments. So we obviously still have a very large group of people focusing on that as well. But my group is just kind of one where all these non-traditional things have sort of flowed into it. And I think it's been really good and interesting for me, certainly professionally, and hopefully for Tara and folks as well.
I mean, that's quite a lot. I mean, that's a lot of big things that sort of are on your plate. So, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong in terms of saying that it seems the way cities are going, or at least where Philadelphia is kind of heading from your perspective, is that there is a group that is responsible for creating innovative and tech-driven solutions that are for public, so outwards facing. And then there is almost like a shared services IT group, which is effectively responsible for running the IT infrastructure, so your computers, your laptops, and so on and so forth. And then increasingly, it seems that both of you are moving towards having something where it can create tech solutions to help cities operate better, or to become more efficient and better at what it does. Would that be correct assessment?
Yes, I think it would. I think all the work we do in our group is not just intended for show, right? It's tends to be the more interesting work, and the media finds it interesting, I think, by the requests we get to talk about it. But I think too, ultimately, we are trying to provide those better services to the people out there. And so the work has to be, even though it's public facing, it is really centered toward providing people with meaningful experiences in technology. And I think when perhaps later in this session, when Tara talks about the permit navigator, that's an excellent example of what we were just talking about.
And I mean, one thing that you mentioned, and I wanted to ask both you and Tara about that sort of digital equity, right? I mean, that's kind of prominent in the work both of you are doing, and you both talk about that. What does the digital equity mean? And what was sort of the driver behind it? Why did you guys, and why did the city of Philadelphia feel like, okay, we need to be digitally equitable? So what does that mean, actually?
Yeah, I can start that one, and then Tara can chime in. Digital equity work is actually where I got my start in the technology office well over a decade ago. I think at the time in Philadelphia, and probably a lot of other large cities, we were at around 40 to 45% of the population who did not have home internet access, which is a pretty incredible number, right? And that's how the idea of the KeySpot program came along, which was essentially a public computing center network of about 79 or 80 centers across the city. That was the public access to technology, so not getting into the home internet piece. And then over the last 8 years or so, we've gradually built up some of the other pieces of the puzzle around digital equity. And you asked about how I think about digital equity. Probably the definition, if you looked it up on Google, is something like making sure everyone has technology capacity so that they can participate in society, democracy, and the economy. That's pretty close. I think I've memorized that by now. The way I think of it, though, is probably a little more subtle, and it's the way we had kind of crafted it out in our digital equity plan. There are 4 pillars to that. So there's the connectivity piece, basic internet connectivity, you have to have that. There's the device piece, so people have the right devices to use that connectivity if it's hopefully there. The third piece is around training and experience, right? So do people know how to use an internet? Do they know how to do an internet search? Do they have an email account? Basic skills like that. And then we're sort of the ecosystem side is the 4th piece. You have to have that network in the city and in government so that all those things are working together. And I think we've hit on all 4 of those things. We have a pretty well functioning network within the city that hits on each of those 4 pieces and supports them. We became a digital equity office officially last year sometime that rests within OIT. So it sounds like we're a bunch of offices nesting within other offices, I suppose, but that's okay. We like to have names in the city for things like that. So, and I'd be curious actually to hear Tara's thoughts on digital equity, because she comes at it probably from a little different space than I do.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the work is so critical. It's becoming harder and harder just to participate in even the workforce without, having access to the internet or the devices that you need or anything like that. But the way that this work touches other departments and the city at large is, I think, really interesting. So you have the school district when, 2020 happened and there had to be a really quick pivot to virtual learning. It was really important that everyone had that access so kids could go to school. There are traffic safety improvement projects constantly happening across the city, and a big piece of that is community engagement. And making sure that they're, reaching everybody when there's going to be a new project, whether that's a new bike lane, whether it's speed cushions coming in, et cetera. Kind of doing this mix of both digital surveys and paper surveys to make sure that they're reaching everybody. But when the census stuff started to roll around, doing outreach for that. So the digital equity piece really does touch like every department and touches the city at large. And yeah, I would just say that it's, really, really critical work, but especially now more than ever.
I think too, that what I might add to that is, since I've been in the space for a long time, for many years, digital equity was really about internet connectivity, or that's what people thought it was about. They really focused on internet connectivity, specifically home internet access. And that was certainly a need. But there were those other three legs of the stool, right? So again, the device, the ability to use it, the ecosystem around it. And I think what we found after the pandemic, and probably caused by the pandemic, is digital equity became a more holistic thing for people to consider rather than just focusing on that internet access piece. And I think too, I wouldn't say we've solved the internet access piece, but 10 years later, we do now have discount internet offers. Whereas 10 years ago, we did not have those. It was full price internet, and a lot of people just can't afford that. So the Comcast Internet Essentials packages of $10 a month or whatever, $9.95 or something like that. That's a new thing. And it really goes a long way showing how you can impact a policy issue, I think, if you are consistently talking about the need for something.
And then over the past 10 years, have you guys actually seen an increase in uptake of like digital equity? Has it gotten better in your experience?
It has. We did a citywide survey, I think it was last year. We were down to about, you think about this, 16%. So we've gone from somewhere around 40 to 45 to 16. And, to be fair, that does mirror a lot of other big cities have decreased the rate of lack of access. But I think we wouldn't have gotten there unless we had done a lot of the things we had been doing over the past decade. It takes a long time to move the needle. It really does.
It does. I mean, that's still something to go from 45, 50% or 40, 45% exclusion down to about 15, 16%. That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So well done, both of you, on that.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask about sort of what is KeySpot? I mean, what's that program about? What does it do? What sort of lessons have you learned? What are the successes that you guys have had running that program?
Yeah, so that's a program that has really evolved a lot, and it's use the consultant term, pivoted to something else entirely at this point, I think based on need. But we started that specifically as a public computing center network so that people would have a place to go, whether it was a Parks and Rec facility, maybe a transitional housing facility where they would be able to access the internet. That was a grant-funded initiative, very large grant that the city won under the Obama administration, a stimulus grant. Program operated for quite a few years and still is functional. There are still a number of public computing centers. We don't call them KeySpot anymore. It's been rebranded, and I no longer manage them, which is a good thing, I'll say now. But I think the way that has evolved particularly is to the PHL Connect Ed program, and that was the K through 12 subsidized internet program. We stood up pretty quickly at the start of the pandemic. So in about 3 months, we did manage to get all of our public school students access to the internet and devices through the PHL Connect Ed program. So I think that original need for public access via public computing centers has evolved a little bit to just be a little more charted to the various needs that are out there now. The next one we're working on, not sure where this will go really, is thinking about how we can better use our public assets for, say, public Wi-Fi purposes or digital equity revenue, perhaps. So if you let vendors use rooftops. There's probably a lot of interesting things you can do around digital equity.
That's pretty interesting, actually. And are there sort of any lessons learned having gone through that K-Spot program? Like if you were redoing it today, are there any things that you would do differently?
Yeah, probably. I do think one of the things we did really well, I'm not sure I would have the energy to do again today, is that I felt like that effort was really truly collaborative, and it was truly collaborative across a whole bunch of different institutions. At some point, there were about 60 different organizations involved with that program. And I think we could not have come out with the program in a way that we did and as successfully as we did had we not taken that approach. And the approach we took, strangely, was we're really listening to, maybe not strangely, right, but we're really listening to the people out there in the neighborhoods, the organizations who do this work every day and are experts in it. You know, at the city at that time, I was not an expert in it, nor were many of us. So I think it was pulling together that different expertise in a respectful way and generating a really successful program out of that. But, you know, collaboration is a word that has really become, it's a little fuzzy today, I would say. And so I go back to the original definition of it, or the way I define it, which is it's something that produces, it's an activity that produces a program, let's say, that could not have been produced if I or Tara were to sit in a room and do it ourselves. It's got to be that collaborative effort, different experiences, expertise, ideas, things like that. So I feel good about that. In terms of your original question, I think was asking me what I would do differently. I think probably it would be keeping the name KeySpot. I'm not sure why the city ultimately decided to rebrand those. I think it was a pretty effective brand and that one that people knew. But, you know, in cities, programs move from department to department, and then the department decides what they want to do with it. So out of my hands at this point.
I guess so. I mean, Tara, I'm not ignoring you or anything. I actually have a few questions just specifically for you, but I want to get through this part with Andrew first, and then I come to you, and then we're going to come back to talk a few things once more, sort of collaboratively. I mean, Andrew, you and I were talking about it yesterday, and I wanted to understand from your perspective, sort of the function of innovation and where you think that should be based. Is it a leadership driven thing, or is it more an operationally driven thing? Like, what are your thoughts on sort of the function of innovation in a city?
Yeah, Tara knows I can talk for hours about this, but I promise not to.
Please do.
The flip answer to that is that I think it has to come from both levels. So I do think there has to be some leadership support for taking an innovative approach. But I also say, you know, it's only innovative if you actually implement something. So there does have to be that operational side of things. In terms of where innovation is in the city, there are a lot of different models. Sometimes it is in the mayor's office. The idea with that, or the reason for putting it there, is that in theory, you have the support of the top level official in the city, and it will be much easier to get things done because of that. I am of the opinion that does not always work as well as it's meant to work. Because I think in a large city, certainly in Philadelphia, you have departmental leadership who is, they're both very smart and they're both very protective of their own department, and they aren't necessarily going to do immediately everything the mayor wants them to, right? Even though it sounds like they should, perhaps. So I like the idea of kind of how we have centered innovation within an operating department, the Innovation and Technology Office, because for two reasons, really. I think it's given a little more sustainability to the work. So, you know, we talked yesterday, Faz, about transitions in mayors and how long mayors can stay in office. It's harder to sustain this kind of work through a mayoral transition if it is in the mayor's office, because traditionally those folks change and all the policies do as well. So I think that has given us a little more sustainability, and we've made it through at least one transition at this point. I anticipate we'll make it through a second one. And then I think the other thing people forget is that though we take great care to separate innovation and technology, we say a lot of times they're not the same thing because they aren't. In practice, a lot of times when you try to do innovative things, you are using technology to enable those things. So they are very much connected, although they're not the same thing. So I think that gives us in the technology office a little bit of an inside view of how we might use technology to enable some process, because it's ultimately process change to me that we get at as innovation in the city.
Great. So Tara, now I wanted to ask you, like, it's something that I've been sort of thinking about since I got to know about this panel, and also an area that a lot of Canadian cities have been working at and trying to figure out, and that's the city permit program. Like, what did you do with it? How does it look like today? Where did that need come from? Like, what made you get involved with that?
Yeah, so the Permit Navigator program that we have, so that came actually from residents themselves. The Commerce Department has regular interactions with folks who are in what are called business improvement districts, and there's also corridor managers that they're in contact with on a regular basis. And the Office of Licenses and Inspections also has constituents that they're meeting with on a regular basis. And this project really developed out of those, resident needs, saying, we're really confused by the permit process. It's very complicated and there's a lot of layers. We would like it to be easier, like ultimately make it easier. So ultimately we invested in a pilot of this tool with a vendor called Open Counter. And what the tool does is walk somebody through a decision tree to see what permits that they need. We only did a few use cases that were related to commercial corridors. So say somebody was opening a sit-down restaurant, right? Or a takeout restaurant or something like that. They would put that in the tool. There's like a drop-down list of what use cases are included. It would then take them to a map to see where they were looking to open that, and it would give all of the zoning information in some like more plain language than it is generally. And then it would walk them again through a series of questions. Are you erecting a sign? Does your place have carry out? Things like that. Because there's various permits that go into this, right? Through the health department, through the streets department, all these different folks that have to be involved potentially in a new storefront opening. And at the end of that process, the person filling that out will sort of get this summary that will take them to where those permits live on each page. So I think one of the most important things to note about this is that it doesn't change our permit process. It doesn't get into that because that's a much bigger and I think a much different task. But just helps people understand a little bit better what they need. So they can kind of go into it being like, I know I have to go to the health department and get this much, all of this paperwork, and then this is approximately how much it's going to cost, because the tool will also give the cost as well, or approximate of whatever data it is. And the tool is updated regularly. And the way we sort of framed this as we were putting it out to the public was a really interesting cross-departmental collaborative project, and something that we really haven't done to that extreme before. We had said, hey, we have this pilot, we're only doing these use cases, and we'd really like your feedback. And if it works, we would invest in it again and include even more permits and more residential permits and whatever else. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go back to the drawing board. So really just letting the public know, like, hey, this came from you all, and we want to get your feedback in whatever way makes sense for you, and we'll take that and then run with it.
So, I mean, has the pilot been implemented, as in, has it gone beyond the pilot stage? And is that like how the city is operating right now?
Yeah, I'll take this, Andrew.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can start it anyway. So yeah. The tool itself launched in February of this year. It's still active and up and running. And I think it's sort of at the stage now of, are we going to, work with the same vendor and include the rest of the use cases, or are we going to go and try to work with a different vendor? I'm not on the smart cities team anymore, so I'm not totally sure where kind of what direction they're headed. But as when we did that initial launch, the business owners were quite happy in the responses and the feedback that we got. Was, this tool is generally easy to use and does give us that information that we're looking for. And we recognize that it doesn't impact the actual permit process, but it is a lot easier for us to fill something like this out and just know what we need. But Andrew, I don't know if you want to respond at all to the.
Yeah, just to add that I believe we are using the same vendor, and we are moving forward with scaling up that pilot. We are doing more use cases. We have more money to do that development. So it's a good example, Foz, of one of our smart cities projects that has actually scaled up. I mean, I think when you try these pilots, you kind of go in expecting that some will be really useful and some may not be as useful. And you hope that the department will see the value of those that are useful. And then the cost for scaling that up becomes part of the city's or the department's operating budget, really, rather than within the smart cities budget. So it goes from smaller budget to larger budget that lives within the department. So that's kind of the approach we take generally with our smart cities work. We're the tester, we're the enabler over at OIT for a department who wants to try new technology, and then the successful stuff they pick up and maintain from there on.
I mean, I want to talk about a little bit about smart cities, but before that, I just had a couple of things, Tara. I mean, you mentioned in terms of it doesn't change the city's decision-making on the permit. So I'm guessing what it means is that the internal decision-making in terms of the factors and the number of things they need to consider in order to decide, that doesn't change. But what it does do is, if I were to show up at City of Philadelphia and I have no idea where I'm supposed to go, what do I actually need to do? So the tool is supposed to help me navigate to sort of define my needs and then guide me in the right direction, as in, if you're looking for this, this is where you need to go, and that's how you need to get it, and that will be the cost. Would that be correct?
Yeah, yep, that's exactly it. And again, kind of including all of that information in one place with the zoning information of, like, clicking on a map and saying, this is the address that I'm looking for. The map shows you it's like red or yellow or green, and red means you can't do it there. Yellow means there's like some special exceptions, and you're gonna have to work closer with somebody from L&I to see whether that is allowed or not. And green means you are allowed to put it there. And then the questions, it's it's either yes or no or a numerical thing. They're short questions, and yeah, it just gets you to that final page that says, here's exactly the permits that you need, here's how much you should expect to pay with that, and here's the website that you go to start. We have a system called Eclipse that folks go into and start doing all their permit stuff, and that is that gets routed through all different departments who are involved: streets, water, health, whoever. So it doesn't impact theirs at all. But kind of, as you stated, just lets people know where to start, really.
That's pretty impressive, actually. I mean, one, it certainly would help citizens, but it also, I'm guessing, would reduce the burden on number of city frontline employees who are just having to field so many calls about, oh, what am I supposed to do? Where do I go for this?
Yeah.
So now it's a much easier tool available for them to navigate, to figure out, okay, is this doable, not doable? Do I worry about this? Do I not worry about it? That's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah. It was a very large undertaking for licenses and inspection, and they did like a fantastic job. But they were really the ones that were getting that decision tree in order for all the different use cases. So we did, like I said, kind of commercial storefronts that included food, retail, etc. And then I think it was residential, single family, and multifamily homes were included initially. So it took a long time to sort of get those decision trees worked out, because there were so many for commercial, but it was a really good exercise too, because now when we're looking at the scale up, we kind of know where in the process we can improve, what's kind of working, what's not, but it'll kind of be hopefully a smoother process going forward.
I mean, I wanted to talk about smart cities, but just one last thing, that in terms of inherently, whenever we are implementing tech, it is a new thing. It requires people to change from where we are today and to do things slightly differently. So, I mean, how do you go about doing that in terms of getting people to buy into that change? Is it like how much time and effort it's spent on focusing on sort of the cultural shift within an organization? And then cities are old, long established, traditional beings. And how much of it is driven through technology?
So I could talk about this question forever because I'm really big on the cultural shift. And so much of my work and my colleagues are developing programs and running programs that help get at the cultural shift. What Andrew said before, that, innovation and technology are separate. They often work together, but you don't necessarily need technology to be innovative. So everything that we're doing isn't necessarily giving residents technology. That's certainly part of the work, especially when it comes to smart city and digital equity and navigating those spaces. But it's also really important to have that culture where people understand design thinking and nonlinear processes. And what my colleague and I do, we run programs. We have the Innovation Academy, and that trains 20 plus employees each year. We partner with Jefferson University, and we run an academy that trains employees in design thinking. And the idea is that they'll take those tools, and they get like a booklet, and they practice these tools with folks around the city. And they can go back and take those tools back to their teams and help start to integrate that. We also have an innovation fund that, we work with the Philadelphia City Fund, and it gives departments who apply small amounts of grant funding, $10,000 to $20,000, depending on what the project is, to implement a new program and to see, if it works. And often that might be the department's only chance to try something new. And if it does work, it gives them a lot of solid footing, really, in a budget request, or to justify kind of expanding their team or expanding that program. And all of this work is really, really important to start getting people to think about solving problems in new ways, because then when you do introduce some of the more complicated technology or things that change their day to day, people end up being more receptive to it. And I think it's also pretty important to be working with folks who are already kind of open to that work and who want to work with us. We never go in and say, and Andrew alluded to this before, we never go in and say like, oh, hey, you need this new piece of technology, or like, you need to do this, and kind of tell people how to change the way they're working. We're already trying to work with folks who want to start thinking outside of the box and want to integrate these new practices. And kind of, it's slow, but, want it to catch on. And we see it even more with like younger people coming up and who there's a desire for that and a need for that at the city.
I think too, as a general rule, cities and the public sector does not do change management particularly well. It is very, it is very difficult. I remember, I'll just tell a quick historic story here. I was involved early in the 2000s with this project that was sort of joint between housing and the technology office, actually how I got into the technology office in the first place. And it was this grandiose housing database property request system. Took several $1 million in a number of years to implement. And what happened was the technology itself won a lot of awards for being creative, innovative, good user interfaces, things like that. And ultimately, it was never used by the people who should have used it. Partly because we had no one to really do that change management piece, but also because entirely external to that, there was a political decision made at the time to reorganize the housing offices. So as you can imagine, what happens if you're reorganizing offices, people generally take that as job loss. So how are you going to say, we're going to implement this great new technology, which, by the way, will be more efficient and will be helpful for you, at the same time you're doing a housing reorganization? And it just died because of that, which was unfortunate. But not all of these are successful.
So, I wanted to understand a little bit more in terms of Philadelphia's sort of plan and desire to becoming a smart city. So is there like a roadmap towards it? Is that something, obviously, so things like the permit program or Key Spot, these are initiatives that are coming through, but is that part of that, okay, this is where we want to be by certain amount of time, or is that just, hey, this is the logical thing for us to do, this is where we can make a change, make a difference to our residents' life? Like, I'm just trying to understand, where is that sort of decision making, where is that process going?
Yeah, so smart city is a pretty new thing generally, certainly in a lot of places, I think, but certainly in Philadelphia. So our first smart city roadmap that you asked about was in 2019. It was pretty general because we really hadn't done much at that point because it was such a new thing. And I think we don't have an official new roadmap out, but I think what has happened as we've gone through two smart cities directors since then is that it's become a little more stable within the city, particularly in terms of the process. So what I spoke of before, where we're really interfacing with some of the departments out there, listening to what they want to do as far as their business process, and then helping them test the technology that might improve them. That is kind of the basic conceptual working, I would say, of the Smart City program now. And I think probably when you start programs, you're in a position where you're kind of throwing things at the wall and you're seeing what sticks. So you hear a project idea, you try it, right? Or someone comes to you with an opportunity to try something, you try it. Some of them work, some of them don't. But I do think it's a little more deliberate now, since even we produced that first roadmap, just because it's a little more gelled. There are kind of three buckets in our smart cities world now. It's mobility, infrastructure, and software application development. We sort of define smart city more broadly than traditionally it is through sensors only. So there is that kind of work, of course. But so I think within each of those buckets, there are several projects that I think came from the departments, right? So we know there is the business need out there, and for which we are applying some new technology, and then we'll see what happens at the other end and which of those we can sustain.
We've got about another 4 or 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to take this moment to get to sort of ask you both a little bit more personally. So first of all, Tara, congratulations on finishing your master's. That's pretty cool. May of 2023, so well done. What got you into public sector? Like, why did you want to become involved with public sector and work for a city? Like, what got you interested in this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always been interested and had a passion for government and just generally public sector work in general. When I was in school, I did study anthropology, but I studied a lot of almost like public anthropology and applied anthropology, and using sort of the tools and the thinking that you learn in there to solve problems. And that's really, I think, where it started. I worked for a nonprofit for 4 years after I got out of school, both teaching and doing program management, and got the opportunity to work in government when they were looking for someone to come in and essentially redevelop the traffic safety education program. And I didn't have a transportation background really, but I did have an education background and had worked with school districts. I knew lesson plans and all that stuff. So I ended up being a good candidate for that, and got the job. And it was so powerful to see the change, that the scale of change that you're able to be a part of. I had been working with all of the Philly schools really within the district, and helping create this program that to make it work for the city. And traffic safety education is something that's really important, obviously, and something that's also like very much needed in Philly, unfortunately. But you know, it's a really important program, and teachers wanted it, the school district wanted it, so many people did. But to be able to get it off the ground and just see the impact, and to be able to deliver like a service to people, a free quality service to schools. And schools don't often get, it's sometimes free, but not quality, and sometimes quality, but not free. So we got the best of both worlds and created a really strong partnership there. And I think that really just kind of got my interest even more piqued. And I got the opportunity to come over to the innovation team, initially working on the smart city side, because I had a lot of project management, and there was a lot of like, you know, consultant stuff and invoicing stuff and all sort of project management things that I had a lot of experience with from my previous role, but was so excited to come over here and work a little bit more strategically. So sort of like left their project management side on the smart cities to come over to this innovation ecosystem and work on that like culture change in innovation and strategic planning and looking at how we move forward from all that. So that's in a long-winded nutshell, is my kind of story of how I got here.
And Andrew, how about you? How did you end up? Like, is that what you always wanted to do when you were coming out of college, that, hey, one day I want to work for a city?
No, not at all. My undergraduate degree was in biology, which has nothing to do with anything that I do now. Basically, I started traveling after I got my bachelor's degree. I learned that you could go to school and learn about place and places and why those places were different. That sounded like it meant I should get a geography degree. So I got my geography degree. Didn't really have any particular interest in the public sector. That was just where the job popped up. It was a long time ago. I've been in the public sector for a long time. And I always tell people the way I've been able to stay in the public sector as long as I have is to move around and do different things, generally on an upward trajectory, salary wise and responsibility wise. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that. And then the other thing I think is interesting. Maybe it's not interesting. I think it's interesting, but I've been teaching at Temple for a long time. I was in the geography program, and I'm in the same program that Tara came out of. She never had me as an instructor. I always make that point, but that sort of is great, right? Because I get to teach what I do. And I think it makes me a little more creative because I have to figure out how I'm going to explain some of this work that we do in our group to people who have not had exposure to it. And uniformly, people are kind of surprised the public sector is doing that work. And so that's why I'm still in it. And I would just close by saying the other cool thing is that next year, Tara and I are co-teaching a course about communications in the public sector.
Ah,
so that should be exciting.
So you both share a passion for teaching.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
oh, that's great.
I'm really interested I'm very interested in co-teaching as well. So the collegiality, the collaboration, that's interesting. And how do you make that work in front of a classroom of students? Pretty fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you both. And for people who will be listening to that in a few days' time, Andrew will be at Intelligent Cities Summit Canada, which is third week of October. So if that's something you find useful and then you're curious about sort of the different projects and initiatives that are going on in Philadelphia, then, well, you know where to find Andrew. Once again, my thanks to you both. You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate you sharing your insight and your sort of knowledge and understanding of the things that are happening. Thank you very much, and take care, and wish you all the best.
Thanks, Vaz. It's been great being here.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure.